Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Brian Kelly, the LSU Tigers, not quite done yet in the transfer portal as three names have emerged as top targets for this program heading into 2024. I want to talk about those three names, talk about what they bring to this LSU program, but I think more importantly, I kind of want to take a deeper dive into some of the comments that Brian Kelly made regarding the transfer portal, how they use NIL, because it's really taken the college football media by storm. I've listened to a lot of smart people talk about this situation. I want to give you guys some of my takes on Brian Kelly's comments as well. Fired up to get into it. Before we do, and as always, just want to say one, thank you to you guys, to the LSU fans. Covering the portal, covering the recruiting trail over the last couple of weeks. And it's been a blast for the boys. I can't thank you guys enough for all the support you guys have shown. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear some feedback from you guys on some of the Brian Kelly comments. I'm going to give you guys my takes. Would love to hear from you guys in the comments section. And without further ado, before we get into the targets, I do want to touch briefly, on the Brian Kelly comments. And I think it's kind of getting misunderstood a little bit in terms of Brian Kelly comes out and says, we are not going to buy players in the transfer portal using NIL. That doesn't mean Brian Kelly's not going to use NIL during his recruiting process. I think we all know that. You take a sneak peek at the 2025 class, I think you get a good feel that LSU is pretty strong in the NIL department. I think it gets more at, we're not going to go out and bring in a 1-year rental for 6 months and kind of pay well above market price. And that's kind of what you saw programs do. And I'm not necessarily knocking a program like Oklahoma or Miami that went out and made it happen in the transfer portal, but I'm more saying that that's not how Brian Kelly wants to operate in the transfer portal. And you look at the value of the guys on the inside of the defensive line. You take a guy like Dominic Williams, for example, the rumors that he's commanding 7 figures in the NIL department to come play for his team. That, make no mistake about it, Dominic Williams is a guy that he's going to be on Oklahoma for 6 months, and then he's going to go to the NFL draft. And I think Brian Kelly's sitting there and saying, are we really going to pay that much money for really a 6-month rental? That's probably not how you build a program. And I can certainly see why teams like Oklahoma that's going into the SEC for the first time, or the Miami Hurricanes that really have a special team heading into 2024, you can understand why they're willing to spend a little extra to maximize their team heading into 2024. But you look at how Brian Kelly wants to operate. He's not necessarily a guy that wants to build this thing through the portal. And you saw Brian Kelly get active in the portal during those first 2 years because the depth chart needed to be revamped. And I think he certainly did a good job. I don't think many people give Brian Kelly enough credit in terms of what he was able to do turning around this roster the last couple of years. I know didn't leave this roster in a good spot. Brian Kelly has it in a good spot, but I think his strategy in the transfer portal is not to go out and grab a guy for 6 months where you're really paying well above market for those kind of players. And I think you kind of see that reflected in some of the names that they're going after towards the back end of this process, where we had a nice package for Dominic Williams to come to LSU in the transfer portal. Why don't we split that package into 2 and go grab 2 really good guys on the inside of the defensive line that might not be the difference makers or the caliber of Dominic Williams, but you make no mistake about it. Where were we most nervous about LSU on the inside of the defensive line? It didn't have to do with one really good player. It had to do with depth. It had to do with bodies. And so this strategy for LSU, to me, from a roster construction standpoint, makes a lot of sense. Instead of bringing in one Dominic Williams, let's see if we can go bring in 2 quality guys on the inside of the defensive line and really bolster up that depth on the inside. Because, again, that was probably the bigger question that we had about this LSU program heading into 2024. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. And let's get into some of the players. And I want to start with Grand Valley State, interior defensive lineman, Javier Suggs, who, you look at Suggs, I'll be the first one to admit, I don't watch much Grand Valley State football, Division II level on Saturdays. That being said, there is something to believe that a lot of programs believe in a guy like Javier Suggs. You look at some of the offers. USC hosted him on a visit, Wisconsin, Kentucky, Michigan, LSU. It seems to sound like it's between Michigan and LSU. And LSU probably seems to be in the driver's seat. And I mean, there's a lot to believe in with a guy like Suggs. You look at Michigan, right down the road from where he was playing at Grand Valley State up in Michigan at the Division II level. They probably know Suggs just about as good as any program in the country. And if they're willing to bring him in with how loaded the inside of the defensive line is for Michigan, you kind of feel good about what Suggs can bring to LSU heading into 2024. And you kind of talk about the MO of a guy like Javier Suggs. He's much more of a penetrator. He's a little bit smaller on the inside of the defensive line. He plays really tough. He can get into the backfield. This is a quality body for LSU to add heading into 2024. You take a look at the other name that kind of emerged for LSU, was committed to Michigan State, backed off his commitment. It sounds like it's coming down to USC, Colorado, and LSU. Brandon Lane coming from SF Austin. This is another interesting name and another guy that is highly coveted by some top Power 5 programs. We just talked about some of the names that were kicking the tires on Brandon Lane. This one would make a lot of sense too. And if you're to ask me personally, would you rather have one Dominic Williams or Brandon Lane and Suggs? I think I'm probably going with Brandon Lane and Suggs. And both of these players are probably not to the caliber that Dominic Williams is. I think we all know that because we kind of know what Dominic Williams is at that Power 5 level for TCU. That being said, you look at LSU and what they're trying to do in the portal, it's much more predicated on depth on the inside of the defensive line than star talent. You just got to have some capable bodies on the inside to kind of withstand the duration of an SEC season. So, yes, it stung to lose out on a guy like Dominic Williams. It is obviously really the last question mark we have about this LSU program heading into 2024. I think it could kind of be a little bit of a blessing in disguise for LSU, where you miss out on Dominic Williams. You have a big chunk of NIL resources, you might say, that was going to go to Dominic Williams that now you can allocate to some other players in the portal. Bringing in Javier Suggs, Brandon Lane, I think would make a lot of sense for this LSU program. The last name I want to mention, another Michigan target that I was watching some film on earlier yesterday morning, Wesley Walker, coming over from Tennessee. Now, the MO with Wesley Walker is he's not going to be a top 100 NFL draft pick, but he is one of the more experienced safeties in the country. You go back and look at some of the numbers. Wesley Walker has played over 2,200 snaps during his college football career. I've looked at a lot of safeties in the portal. I could not find a safety that's played more football at the Power 5 level than Wesley Walker between his time at Georgia Tech and Tennessee. Transferred to Louisville for that spring semester. He's back in the portal. It sounds like LSU is going to make a run at Wesley Walker. And I think what's most intriguing about Wesley Walker is not necessarily the upside that he brings LSU, but it's the experience. And you look at where LSU struggled in the back end. It certainly started with coaching. We know that's going to get better with Blake Baker, but I mean, it was a really young secondary, right? When you're starting true freshmen at the cornerback spots, guys like Stamps and Toviano, I should say, I mean, you're young. And I think Wesley Walker is a guy that you can kind of put into this LSU secondary, have that veteran voice that's played a lot at the SEC level, a lot at the Power 5 level, and kind of, smooth out that ship in the back end. A guy that's extremely versatile too, probably thrives the most as a free safety, kind of center field safety. He's got some nice range in the back end, but guy that played over 150 snaps as a box safety, spent some time as a nickel defender as well. He can hold up in man coverage. He can come up and run support. He can give you that center field safety feel as well. You're kind of, bringing in a defensive chess piece that you can do a lot of different things with. And you look at Blake Baker and how he wants to operate. He wants to give a lot of different looks to opposing offenses. And a guy like Wesley Walker, you can ask to do a lot of different things, and kind of fits what LSU wants to do from a versatility standpoint. I think all three of these additions would make a lot of sense for LSU. You look at the inside of the defensive line, you're addressing just the pure numbers and depth on the inside. And then in the back end, you're just bringing in another veteran that you can kind of do some different things with and potentially give you some flexibility in terms of how you're going to use other bodies in that LSU secondary. These three names are not necessarily flashier than Dominic Williams. But if you kind of said you could land Dominic Williams or these three names, I think a lot of LSU fans would say, give me those three names because they seem to make this LSU team better heading into 2024 than just one Dominic Williams. So I guess to round out the conversation, yes, it stings to lose Dominic Williams, but I think Brian Kelly is operating in the portal probably the right way. If you were to say, how should LSU and Brian Kelly use the transfer portal, it's not to overpay for guys like Dominic Williams. It's really about filling in the cracks. And I think these three names better fill in the cracks for this LSU program heading into 2024 than just one Dominic Williams. I think it makes a lot of sense. Obviously stings to not hit on Dominic Williams, but we'll see if LSU can get it done over the next couple of days. Of course, we'll keep you guys as updated as possible with what LSU is doing in the portal. Appreciate y'all rocking with the fellas. Would love to hear from you guys in the comment section as well. And we'll talk to y'all later.